April 8, 1943, 2,700 feet above Caen, France. The oxygen mask couldn't conceal Oberleutnant Ralph Herrmachen's smirk as he observed the ungainly shapes laboriously ascending towards his formation through the crystal-clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5. The seasoned ace of Jagdgeschwader 26, age 26, studied the American pursuit aircraft making their inaugural combat foray over occupied Europe. "The armies of the Reich have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingman, unable to suppress his mirth at the sight of the colossal Republic, P-47 Thunderbolts struggling to gain altitude. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward in a tight formation, their 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R 2800 double Wasp engines straining against their 7-ton mass. To German aviators accustomed to the svelte Spitfires and agile Soviet fighters, these corpulent American machines appeared almost absurd. Barrel-shaped fuselages topped with greenhouse canopies, wings that seemed disproportionately small for their massive bodies, propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's arsenal. What Herrmachen didn't realize, what none of the German pilots circling like wolves above could have fathomed, was that they were witnessing the advent of the instrument that would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would metamorphose from objects of derision into harbingers of dread, their 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns becoming the most feared sound in German skies. The calculus of destruction was already loaded within those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ordnance, a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, sufficient concentrated firepower to cleave a Messerschmitt in half in under 2 seconds. The transformation commenced that April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, detected the German formation maneuvering for an assault. The former Eagle Squadron veteran, who had transitioned from RAF Spitfires mere weeks prior, grasped what his men had yet to comprehend. That survival in the P-47 necessitated a complete abandonment of their ingrained understanding of aerial combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from conventional pursuit aircraft design principles. While the Germans had pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for climb and turn performance, Republic Aviation had engineered something unprecedented, a high-altitude juggernaut that leveraged mass, power, and ordnance to redefine the paradigms of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots dispersed across the French heavens that morning were individuals destined for legendary status, future aces whose names would instill terror in Luftwaffe hearts. But on April 8, 1943, they were neophytes in an unproven machine, confronting the most experienced pursuit force in the world. The Germans had been engaged in continuous conflict since 1939, boasting veterans of Poland, France, Great Britain, and Russia. The Americans had been in combat for precisely 0 days. This narrative chronicles how industrial might triumphed over tactical ingenuity, how quantity and quality coalesced into overwhelming supremacy, and how German pilots' laughter transmuted into terror as they discovered the devastating impact of synchronized Browning machine guns on an aircraft at 400 yards. The Republic P-47. Thunderbolt had emerged from a June 1940 panic. As German fighters swept across France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They desired a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's elite. What Kartveli conceived instead was a Leviathan that redefined the realm of possibility. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli confided to his design cadre, "but it will be a dinosaur with pleasing proportions." The XP-47B prototype, which first took to the skies on May 6, 1941, astonished all who beheld it. At 9,900 pounds empty, it weighed 65% more than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. The colossal turbo-supercharger system, with its intricate ductwork traversing the aft fuselage, bestowed upon it an almost gravid appearance. Test pilots approaching it for the initial time invariably posed the identical query: does that thing actually fly? Not only did it fly, but it flew with an unparalleled grace at altitude. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower, could sustain full output at 27,000 feet, where German fighters struggled for air. The turbo supercharger, fed by exhaust gases, delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere, where the atmosphere was too rarefied for conventional superchargers. Major Hubert Hub Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group undergoing training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially harbored a disdain for the aircraft. His unit had lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training mishaps between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 had claimed more American lives in training than the Germans would in the initial months of combat. It ground-looped on landing, torque-rolled on takeoff, and dove with such ferocity that pilots discovered compressibility, their controls freezing as shock waves formed upon the wings. But those who mastered it uncovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma, who would ascend to become one of America's foremost aces with 27 victories, recounted his inaugural flight. It was akin to strapping oneself to a locomotive. The power was inconceivable. You didn't pilot it, you aimed it. The initial combat engagements in April and May 1943 corroborated every German preconception. The P-47s lacked the turning radius of the Focke-Wulf 190s, the climb rate of the Messerschmitt 109s, and could not match their agile handling at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots swiftly devised tactics to exploit these deficiencies, attacking from below, where the ponderous Thunderbolts faltered, forcing turning engagements where agility superseded firepower. Hauptmann Josef Pips Priller, commanding officer of Jagdgeschwader 26, reported to headquarters following his initial encounter. The new American fighter is destined for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our lads are dubbing them fat targets, pretending to be warriors. The statistics appeared to validate German confidence. In their inaugural month of operations, the American fighter groups sustained losses of 14 Thunderbolts for merely 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, discreetly suggested the Americans might reconsider their aerial mount of choice. British pilots jested that the optimal evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and circumnavigate the capacious cockpit. Yet, something peculiar was transpiring in those early encounters that German intelligence failed to apprehend. The P-47s that were downed had absorbed incredible punishment before succumbing. One aircraft returned from a May 4th mission, bearing 21 cannon impacts and over 100 machine gun strikes. Damage that would have disintegrated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The massive radial engine, devoid of vulnerable cooling systems, shrugged off hits that would have incapacitated a liquid-cooled fighter. More significantly, when P-47s finally acquired their targets, the outcomes were catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's weapon system forged a convergent zone of devastation that German pilots had never encountered. Unlike the rifle-caliber weaponry of early war fighters or cannon with limited ammunition, the American pursuit aircraft could sustain continuous fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in aerial combat. The event that would commence altering German perceptions unfolded on June 26, 1943, over Lay on France. It involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron, and an engagement that would attain legendary status on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was returning from escort duty when they were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from 2/Jagdgeschwader 26, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand 17 Galland, younger sibling of the renowned Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a flawless assault, diving from the sun with a decisive speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, positioned at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire of multiple assailants, sustaining catastrophic damage within the initial seconds of combat. 2 20mm cannon shells detonated across his aircraft. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid spewed into the cockpit, the engine cowling was ripped away, and fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, attempted to bail out, but discovered the canopy was jammed. A 20mm shell had exploded within the canopy track, sealing it shut, He was trapped within a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. What transpired next defied all assumptions regarding combat damage tolerance. Despite possessing no forward visibility through the oil-streaked windscreen, a barely functional engine that vibrated violently, and controls that responded only sporadically, Johnson managed to level the aircraft and orient it towards England. The P-47 continued its flight with damage that would have reduced any other fighter to falling debris. Then, matters worsened. A solitary Focke-Wulf 190, piloted by an unidentified airman from 2/JG-26, discovered the crippled Thunderbolt limping towards the channel at less 170 miles per hour. Historical research has never definitively identified this pilot, though several names have been proposed based on German combat reports from that day. What followed was one of the most remarkable encounters in aerial warfare history. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire with his two 20mm cannon and two 13mm machine guns. Johnson, incapable of evading, could only cower behind his armor plating and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entirety of the cannon ammunition load. Then, the German repositioned and fired again, this time solely with his machine guns. With his cannon ordnance depleted, the German pilot pulled alongside, staring in disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson could clearly discern his face, young and fair-haired, his expression shifting from confidence to bewilderment to something akin to apprehension. The German repositioned and discharged his remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Still, it flew. He pulled alongside once more, shook his head in apparent astonishment, offered an informal salute, and peeled away, presumably out of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 landed at Manston with its engine failing on the runway. The crew chief ceased counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One cannon shell had detonated mere inches from Johnson's head. Another had exploded against the armor plating behind his seat. The engine had sustained direct impacts. The control cables were partially severed. 3 of the 4 primary longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were pierced. Yet, the aircraft had conveyed him home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft sent tremors through both air forces. American engineers examining the wreckage realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, receiving combat reports from the second flight of Jagdgeschwader 26, initially refused to credit them. No aircraft could absorb such punishment, but the testimony of multiple pilots confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had endured everything the Luftwaffe's premier fighter could deliver and survived. By July 1943, American pilots were learning to leverage the P-47's genuine strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, the 56th Fighter Group commander, had unearthed the secret through brutal trial and error. Do not engage them in a turn. Do not climb with them at low altitude. Utilize your mass, utilize your power, utilize your guns. The Thunderbolt's immense weight, initially perceived as a liability, transformed into an asset. In a dive, nothing could intercept it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could attain 550 miles per hour, exceeding the velocity of any German fighter, even in a vertical descent. This velocity could be converted into altitude during a zoom climb, leaving pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, who would become one of the initial American aces in Europe, developed what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, though pilots referred to it as the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in conventional dogfights, P-47 formations would ascend to 30,000 feet, a superior altitude to where German fighters could operate effectively. When Luftwaffe fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, achieving speeds that rendered deflection aiming impossible for the defending Germans. At the nadir of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would speak. German pilots who survived described it as confronting a veritable torrent of lead. The combined firepower generated an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught within this convergence pattern did not merely descend, they disintegrated. The true revelation of American firepower occurred during the August 17, 1943, dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted to that date. This mission would underscore both the P-47's limitations, specifically its range even with auxiliary fuel tanks, and its terrifying efficacy when deployed appropriately. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft, preparing to engage B-17s with their formidable cannon and rocket armament. The twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed but less agile, constituted the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into their attack dive from 28,000 feet. Oofs! Heinrich Roth, a gunner aboard one of the Me-110s who survived, later recounted in a POW interrogation. The American fighters descended like hammers from the heavens. I opened fire at 800 meters, good hits. I observed them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 did not even waver. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply disintegrated. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings detached from the fuselage, tail severed, the crew compartment shredded into metallic confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt. 100s and 10s were obliterated in less than a minute. The German pilots had never experienced such concentrated firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At the convergence distance, typically calibrated at 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected within a zone approximately 6 feet in diameter. Anything within that zone faced 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself represented a testament to American industrial prowess. While German fighters contended with limited cannon ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm weapon, American pilots could sustain fire for over half a minute. The standard combat load comprised a mix of armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition, arranged in patterns designed for both destruction and ignition. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the effect. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what struck him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was confronting another horrifying reality concerning the P-47. Its performance escalated dramatically with altitude, while German fighters suffered a decline. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained its rated power output up to 30,000 feet. German fighters relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers witnessed their performance degrade significantly above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, encountered this reality fatally on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bromberg, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190 A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the attenuated air. The BMW 801 engine, potent at medium altitudes, was gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were defenseless. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot on his trajectory to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Philipp's distinctive Focke-Wulf with its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was precise. Opened fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection. Observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute observed. Philipp's demise sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their finest, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both the eastern and western fronts, could not prevail against the Thunderbolts, what prospect did average pilots possess? The German High Command ordered an immediate inquiry into the P-47's capabilities. The report delivered to Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring in November 1943 was somber. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could attain. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier. Its armor protection included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, a half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates surrounding the engine. Most disturbingly, its robust construction permitted it to absorb damage that would obliterate 3 conventional fighters and still return to base. In January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 began arriving in England, one that would finalize its transformation from a laughingstock to a nightmare. The P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton Standard hydromatic propeller with paddle blades 13 feet in diameter, possessing broad chord blades that bit into the air like enormous scythes. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and profound. Where earlier Thunderbolts had ascended at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The colossal propeller also enhanced acceleration, enabling P-47s to build energy more rapidly in level flight. Hauptmann Heinz Knoke of Jagdgeschwader, Eins, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He chronicled in his combat diary, "The corpulent American fighters have mastered climbing. We ambushed a formation near Hanover, anticipating our customary advantage. They turned into us and climbed alongside us. When we attempted to disengage, they pursued us upwards to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and torn apart. Nothing remained but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we derided last year. The paddle blade propeller did more than enhance performance. It altered the very sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar generated by the blade tips reaching supersonic velocities could be heard for miles. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone, a deep, menacing rumble that signaled doom from above. They began to call it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. The standard configuration carried 2 108-gallon wing tanks, or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending their range to over 1,000 miles. With the paddle blade propeller providing enhanced performance even when laden, Thunderbolts could engage on equal terms immediately after jettisoning their tanks. The Luftwaffe's response was to concentrate on the bombers, hoping to inflict sufficient losses to halt the American daylight campaign. But this necessitated traversing the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition. German pilots developed a grudging respect, bordering on dread for the large American fighters. Major Erich Hartmann, one of Germany's top aces with 352 victories, predominantly on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, that left him severely wounded. He later recalled in a post-war interview, "We observed them above us, portly silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and remarked, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They descended like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The initial pass obliterated 3 of our fighters, simply vanishing, transformed into burning wreckage. Their guns did not fire in bursts like ours. They unleashed solid streams of fire. Being caught in that airborne torrent meant an immediate end." The escort sorties highlighted another significant P-47 advantage, its stamina. While enemy fighters pushed their engines to the red line, guzzling fuel, these robust American radial engines could maintain efficient cruising at lofty altitudes. Thunderbolts could shadow the bombers for extended durations, seamlessly cycling through defensive positions while retaining sufficient fuel for combat engagement and the journey home. As an increasing number of P-51 Mustangs arrived in the spring of 1944 to assume the long-range escort responsibilities, P-47 squadrons increasingly shifted their focus to ground assault. This transition would ultimately position them as the most dreaded aerial predators in the German arsenal. The strategic pivot began in earnest during April of 1944, coinciding with the Allies' meticulous preparations for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's formidable battery of heavy machine guns proved equally devastating against terrestrial targets. Its standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition possessed the capability to pierce the upper armor of most German military vehicles, while the sheer volume of sustained fire could obliterate less protected targets in mere moments. A 2-second burst unleashed approximately 160 half-inch projectiles into an area roughly the size of a truck. However, it was the integration of bombs and rockets that truly transformed the P-47 into a versatile aerial behemoth. The D-25 model was capable of carrying 2,000-pound bombs beneath its wings, complemented by a 500-pound bomb suspended under its fuselage, a payload equivalent to that of early war medium bombers. Subsequent iterations incorporated zero-length rocket pylons, enabling the carriage of 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each possessing the destructive power of a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luch, commander of the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, personally experienced the ferocity of P-47 ground attacks. They descended so low that the pilots' faces were clearly visible. The noise was sheer terror, engines thundering, rockets screaming. Then came the relentless hammer of those heavy machine guns. An entire column of our transport vehicles simply vanished. 20 vehicles reduced to burning wrecks in a single pass. The psychological toll on the troops was crushing. They dubbed them Yabos, fighter bombers. But these were something far more potent. They were essentially aerial artillery with the precision of sharpshooters. On the 6th of June, 1944, the Luftwaffe would starkly confront the complete shift in the balance of aerial power. Over 500 P-47s provided impenetrable air cover for the invasion, creating an invincible shield above the landing zones. Any German aircraft attempting to reach the beaches were systematically annihilated. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported that the sky belonged entirely to the Americans. Thunderbolts were positioned from sea level all the way up to 30,000 feet. We attempted to penetrate at dawn. 12 fighters from our group. I was the sole survivor. The P-47s were omnipresent at every altitude. Climbing over them was impossible. Diving beneath them was equally futile. Their armament reduced our fighters to falling scrap metal. In the weeks following D-Day, P-47s methodically disrupted German logistical movements during daylight hours. The statistical achievements were staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts accounted for the destruction of 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn conveyances. The Wehrmacht was compelled to operate exclusively under the cover of darkness, severely impeding their ability to counter Allied advances. The Germans deployed every conceivable measure to neutralize the Thunderbolt threat. They reinforced vehicle armor, increased the deployment of anti-aircraft batteries, and developed novel camouflage strategies. None of it proved effective. The P-47's unparalleled combination of speed, resilience, and firepower rendered it virtually unstoppable. Even the formidable 88mm anti-aircraft guns struggled to track the swift, low-flying fighters. While wreaking havoc across Europe, the P-47 simultaneously demonstrated its immense value in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, discovered that the Thunderbolt's inherent qualities were perfectly attuned to the vast expanses and challenging conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, devised tactics specifically tailored for the Pacific environment. On the 11th of October, 1943, Kirby led 4 P-47s against a formation of 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, personally downing 6 enemy planes in a single mission, an achievement that earned him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to engaging agile yet fragile American aircraft, were utterly unprepared for the P-47's formidable combination of firepower and ruggedness. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered P-47s over New Guinea, later recounted, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannons, which could decimate a P-40 with mere hits, seemed utterly ineffective. I unleashed dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying. Streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft asunder. The P-47N variant, developed explicitly for the Pacific, featured enhanced fuel capacity with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending its operational range to 2,350 miles. This model would escort B-29s all the way to Japan, proving that the short-range fighter of 1943 had evolved into a true long-range weapon system. Perhaps the ultimate validation of the P-47's evolutionary prowess came during its engagements with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me 262, with its top speed of 540 miles per hour, should have been beyond the reach of propeller-driven aircraft. However, Thunderbolt pilots discovered they could intercept these jets under specific circumstances, during takeoff and landing when the jets were most vulnerable, and during high-speed dives from altitude. On the 27th of November, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meare of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the first pilots to achieve a kill against a Me-262 in a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meare's Thunderbolt achieved speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, confident in his superior speed advantage, remained unaware of the diving P-47 until Meare's guns erupted at a range of 400 yards. Meare's combat report noted, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large fragments, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not survive." The concentrated fire from 8.50 caliber guns proved more effective than we anticipated against jet aircraft. By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting engine power to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could achieve speeds of 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, sufficiently fast to intercept even jets under certain conditions. Major George Bostwick, commander of the 63rd Fighter Squadron, equipped with P-47s, personally shot down 2 Me-262s in March of 1945. His tactical report underscored the importance of firepower over speed. "The jets are faster, but they cannot turn effectively and they are not durable. One sustained burst from our armament, and they come apart as if made of paper. They are forced to reduce speed to attack bombers. That is when we engage them." The ultimate demonstration of American industrial might materialized during Operation Bodenplatte. The Luftwaffe's desperate final gambit to cripple Allied air power occurred on the 1st of January, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including many of their most experienced pilots, launched surprise assaults on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 airfield near Metz, the home base of the 36th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially achieved considerable success. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot, brought to the command post, gestured towards the burning aircraft and taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Bostwick's response would echo as legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He pointed to the flight line, where ground crews were already clearing damaged aircraft and preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow, we will have 40 new aircraft. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk vanished. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47 D-40s filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England. The Luftwaffe sustained losses of 271 aircraft and 213 pilots during Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. These were losses they could never recoup. The Americans lost a total of 134 aircraft across all attacked airfields, all of which were replaced within a week. The stark numbers narrated a story of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation manufactured 15,683 P-47s throughout the war, exceeding the production numbers of any other American fighter aircraft. At its peak output, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed 1 Thunderbolt every hour, operating around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, erected from an empty expanse of farmland in 1942, was producing 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D necessitated 65,000 individual components, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone comprised 2,400 individual parts, meticulously machined to tolerances of 1,000th of an inch. Despite this complexity, American workers, many of them women who had never even seen an aircraft before the attack on Pearl Harbor, assembled these intricate machines with a precision that surpassed peacetime standards. Ammunition production was equally prodigious. Each P-47 combat sortie required 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, with hundreds of Thunderbolts undertaking daily missions. Ammunition expenditure exceeded 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition manufacturing facilities, produced 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge was manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring flawless feeding through the synchronized gun mechanisms. Fuel consumption was immense. Each Thunderbolt consumed 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, escalating to 300 gallons per hour during combat operations when water injection was engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944. All of this fuel was transported across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves products of American mass production. Even more remarkable than aircraft production was pilot training. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training programs, a figure exceeding the total number of pilots trained by Germany throughout the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight instruction before entering combat, which included 100 hours specifically in advanced fighters. In stark contrast, German pilots were entering combat with less than 100 hours of total flight time by the war's conclusion. This qualitative difference was profoundly evident in combat performance. American pilots arrived in Europe extensively trained in formation, flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactical maneuvers. They had practiced against captured German aircraft, gaining an intimate understanding of their enemy's capabilities and limitations. They possessed an in-depth knowledge of their aircraft systems, having studied technical manuals that German pilots never received. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, who arrived in England in September 1944, exemplified the superiority of American training. I had 420 hours in my logbook, including 75 hours in the P-47. I had fired at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, and studied gun camera footage from actual combat. On my first mission, I knew precisely what to do. The German pilot I faced couldn't have had half my experience. It wasn't even a fair contest. In March of 1945, Oberleutnant Josef Priller, the same pilot who had derisively referred to P-47s as pregnant cows 2 years prior, was interviewed by German propaganda officials aiming to bolster morale. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for public release, revealed the complete metamorphosis in German attitudes. The Thunderbolt is the finest fighter bomber ever constructed. Its firepower is unprecedented. Its weapons never jam, never overheat, and never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and engages like a fighter when necessary. But beyond the machine itself lies what it represents: unlimited American production. They lose 10 aircraft, they build 20. We lose one, and it is gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have ample fuel for training, abundant ammunition for practice, and spare parts for everything. We possess nothing but courage, and courage without resources is merely delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 1943. We are not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death has arrived. The sound haunts us. Mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it is about overwhelming material superiority. They did not defeat us through superior tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. By April of 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most of its aircraft. Experienced pilots were either dead or captured. Airfields lay in ruin, pockmarked with bomb craters. Even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an insurmountable challenge. Engaging meant confronting P-47 formations that dominated every altitude, from ground level up to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Bretschneider, one of the last German pilots to receive training in 1945, flew precisely one combat mission before the war concluded. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted a mere 12 seconds. I saw them diving from above, 4 thunderbolts in perfect formation. I attempted to evade, but they were too swift. The lead aircraft opened fire from 500 meters. My aircraft shuddered as if struck by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wings separated. I barely escaped. While descending by parachute, I witnessed them obliterate my entire staff. 6 fighters were lost in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was absolute. German pilots developed what medical personnel termed Jabo fever, manifesting as physical stress symptoms when thunderbolts were reported in the vicinity. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without trepidation became physically ill before missions involving P-47s. The distinctive roar of approaching thunderbolts instilled panic among ground troops, who understood that immediate survival depended on finding cover without delay. The ultimate statistics of P-47 operations defy comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 86,000 railway cars destroyed, 9,000 locomotives destroyed, 6,000 armored fighting vehicles destroyed, 68,000 trucks destroyed, 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 1,500 vehicles destroyed, 150 locomotives destroyed, countless barges, ships, and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, predominantly equipped with P-47s, executed 213,873 combat sorties, dropped 120,000 tons of ordnance, fired 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. Thunderbolt units achieved an impressive 4.6 to 1 kill ratio in aerial engagements, while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Underlying these statistics lay the human cost. The Luftwaffe suffered approximately 28,000 pilot fatalities in combat against Western Allied forces. Many fell victim to the concentrated firepower of American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of training that Germany could never replicate. By the war's end, the average German fighter pilot possessed less than 30 hours of combat experience. The average P-47 pilot had accumulated over 200 hours. At the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center in Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were debriefed by German intelligence. Records recovered in 1945 revealed German assessments of Allied aircraft. The file on the P-47, continuously updated throughout the war, illustrated a complete reversal of initial opinions. April 1943. Large, unmaneuverable fighter, inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed. Machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Assessment, minimal threat. December 1943. Exceptional high-altitude performance, extreme structural strength, firepower increasingly problematic, pilots exhibiting improved tactics. Assessment, significant threat above 25,000 feet. June 1944. Dominant fighter bomber, superior to all German types above 20,000 feet. Firepower devastating against all target types. Structural strength makes shoot-down extremely difficult. Assessment, critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945. Best fighter bomber of the war. Combination of firepower, durability, and performance unmatched. Pilot quality exceptional. Assessment, unserviceable in direct engagement. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries met in peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe's fighter arm, was asked about the P-47. His response, recorded on video, captured the complete transformation in perspective. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter, and we laughed. We thought the Americans did not understand air combat. We claimed they built a bomber and called it a fighter. We were the ones who failed to understand. The Americans did not attempt to build a European fighter." They built an American one, designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They recognized that in a war of attrition, the aircraft that could withstand punishment and deliver devastating firepower would prevail. They were correct. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, I comprehended everything. The power was incredible. It climbed as if it were falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable. The visibility was excellent. The controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft encased in armor. But what truly impressed me was realizing that America manufactured over 15,000 of these complex machines, while engaged in a two-ocean war. Each one required an engine more intricate than anything Germany produced. Yet, they built them at a faster rate than we could produce simple fighters. That is when I knew we never stood a chance. Those guns, we nicknamed them Roosevelt's piano, because of the distinctive sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 did not merely defeat the Luftwaffe, it annihilated it. The P-47's design perfectly encapsulated American industrial philosophy. Brute force engineering augmented by virtually limitless resources. Every component was overbuilt, overpowered, and over-engineered. The wing spars were capable of supporting 40,000 pounds, triple the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mounts could withstand 12 G-forces. The control cables were duplicated throughout, incorporating automatic backup systems. The ammunition feed system alone was a marvel of engineering. 8 separate ammunition boxes, each holding 425 rounds, fed through electric boost motors to prevent jamming during aggressive maneuvers. The guns were electrically heated to prevent icing at high altitudes. Each gun possessed its own charging mechanism and could be individually synchronized. The convergence point was adjustable from 150 to 400 yards, allowing pilots to optimize for their preferred engagement range. Even after the war, some German veterans maintained that the P-47 triumphed through sheer quantity rather than quality, asserting that German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by sheer numbers. However, combat records tell a different story. In engagements where numbers were equal, P-47s consistently emerged victorious. The heavy machine gun armament, initially dismissed as inferior to cannons, proved more effective in actual combat. Analysis of gun camera footage revealed why cannon shells, while individually more destructive, necessitated precise aiming and possessed limited ammunition, typically between 120 and 200 rounds in total. The P-47's armament created a probability cloud of bullets, ensuring hits even with imperfect aim. At typical engagement ranges, a 2-second burst delivered at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, sufficient to guarantee its destruction. The ammunition itself was superior. American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds utilized a delayed action fuse that ensured penetration before detonation. The incendiary compound burned at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum structures. German 20mm shells, while heavier, often exploded upon surface contact, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston-powered fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine generated more power than entire bomber formations from the preceding war. Its armament delivered more firepower than an infantry squad. Yet, it was manufactured in the thousands, piloted by young men barely out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics who had acquired their skills in mere weeks. The transformation of German sentiment, from derision to abject terror, transpired in less than 2 years. During that era, the flying milk bottle evolved into the most formidable aerial adversary in the Luftwaffe's history. Seasoned aviators, who had confronted Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without faltering, would speak of the P-47s in hushed whispers for decades after the conflict concluded. Within the hallowed halls of the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a meticulously restored P-47D stands as a testament to its legendary status, alongside other iconic combat aircraft. Its descriptive plaque details its technical capabilities and distinguished service record, but the true narrative of its prowess is conveyed through a modest display case. This case houses spent .50 caliber ammunition and a reel of gun camera footage capturing a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under a barrage of fire. Beneath this exhibit, a poignant quote from an anonymous German aviator, extracted from a 1945 interrogation report, offers chilling testimony. Initially, we found them amusing. Those corpulent, ungraceful American machines, incapable of maneuvering, ascending, or engaging in combat. Our mirth evaporated when we grasped their true nature. They possessed no need for evasive tactics or altitude gains. They simply directed their formidable armament towards you, and your existence was extinguished. Our laughter vanished with our fallen comrades. The P-47. Thunderbolt entered the fray as an object of scorn, only to conclude the war as an implement of utter destruction. In the interim, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns fundamentally altered the principles of aerial combat, burying the Luftwaffe beneath an overwhelming deluge of ordnance. German aviators had derided the ungainly American fighter in April of 1943. By May of 1945, no German pilots remained to express such disdain. The thunder had roared its decree, and the heavens were irrevocably claimed by America.